Whenever we talk about this topic, usually the discussion is saturated with plant versus animal argument, which are supported either by plant camp or animal camp. The plant camp is trying to convince how plant sources are better, and the animal camp is trying to convince how animal sources are better. But today, I'd like to go beyond this kind of dualistic argument. Protein for longevity, plant versus fish versus land animals. That's something I'm going to talk about today, so stick around. Hi, my name is Hachiaki Takamiya. I am the author of Ikigai Biohacking and Live Wiser, Not Smarter. In my book, Live Wiser, Not Smarter, Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, I delved into the topic of protein intake. How much protein do you really need per day? And I shared about it with you in the last video. So whether the 0.8 gram per kilogram of body weight is good, or we need more, such as 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight or 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. For details, please watch my other video. The actual title is 0.8 grams versus 1.6 grams, the great protein debate. Today, I'd like to talk about protein sources, how you can source your protein from plant or animals or from fish. Now, whenever we talk about this topic, usually the discussion is saturated with plant versus animal argument, which are supported either by plant camp or animal camp. The plant camp is trying to convince how plant sources are better, and the animal camp is trying to convince how animal sources are better. But today, I'd like to go beyond this kind of dualistic argument and look at the issue from slightly different angles. So please watch the video until the end. But before moving on, I want to ask you to subscribe. If you have not subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button. Thank you. Now, so I'd like to look at the issue more holistically today. For example, I want to include fish, because often fish is not included in this discussion. Whenever people talk about plant versus animal, they usually think of, red meat or chicken versus plant. But fish is quite important, and fish is quite different from other meat sources, and it is different from plant. Therefore, including fish, it changes the argument a lot. Now, ethically speaking, I know most vegetarians and vegans don't eat fish, and you don't think fish is good to eat, ethically speaking. However, if you are talking about kind of spiritual aspect or vibrational aspect, at least in Japan, we regard fish differently from land animals. So in Japanese spirituality, it says, avoid eating animals close to you the most, which means four-legged animals, and next poultry, and finally fish, because fish is farther away from you. Therefore, vibrational speaking, it doesn't affect you as much as four-legged animals. Maybe it doesn't make any sense to you, so that's okay. It's just, but if you think about kind of a vibrational aspect, this is one kind of way to look at it too. So in that way too, it changes when you include fish. Plus, I'd like to include natto in that topic because natto is important, yet it's not talked about at all, partly because natto is not part of the Western diet. Even among the people who practice a plant-based diet, natto is not common, which is very unfortunate because adding natto to your diet makes a lot of difference, especially if you practice a plant-based diet. But this applies to everybody else too. Natto is critical. I'll explain why later. Also, this is for longevity, protein for longevity, which means to increase your health span, like healthy longevity, not building muscles for to become bodybuilder or to become a professional athlete or anything like that. For longevity, you have a different things to think about. For example, injury risk and disease risk. Now, often you want to increase your protein intake for your muscle mass or muscle strength, and that is to prevent from falling, to prevent injury risks. However, you have disease risks as well. And certain factors that we discussed today are the trade-off. Whether you prioritize your muscles or you prioritize reducing your disease risk. You need to think about this trade-off. And then, therefore, not only about muscle health, you need to think about bone health, heart health, brain health, and gut health. Gut health is very critical, but it is not often talked about when discussing protein. Therefore, you need to pay attention to different nutrients, not only protein and bacteria. Plus, circauunual rhythm. Okay, so let's look at plant protein first. What are the plant protein sources? They are beans, nuts and seeds, vegetables, and grains. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? Because it sounds just like Mago wa Yasashii Koku, doesn't it? I often talk about Mago wa Yasashii Koku. That is a guideline in the Ikigai diet. Mago wa Yasashii Koku means beans, nuts and seeds, seaweeds, vegetables, fish, mushrooms, tubers, whole grains, and fruit. So beans, nuts and seeds, vegetables, grains are some of the plant-based protein sources, and they are fiber-rich. That means they are wonderful for gut microbiome that include butyrate-producing bacteria. Now, you may not know about butyrate-producing bacteria, but this bacteria is in the spotlight in Japan at the moment as a longevity bacteria because so I shared this video with you before. It's called, about longevity bacteria discovered in Japanese centurions' gut. So there's a region called Kyotango, and there are 3 times as many centurions there as the national average. And then there's a study going on at the moment called Kyotango Longevity Cohort Research. And in this research, they discovered that butyrate-producing bacteria is abundant in the gut of the senior citizens in Kyotango region. And since then, this bacteria is called longevity bacteria, and it is considered to be the key to longevity. Dr. Yuji Natto, one of the researchers of this cohort study, says that they discovered the correlation between resident muscle mass and the amount of butyrate-producing bacteria in their gut. So butyrate-producing bacteria is generally considered to be good for any kind of longevity or health span in general, but they seem to be something to do with your muscle mass as well. So they're not sure yet, but there may be some connection between this bacteria and muscle mass. So when you think about protein, if you want to increase your muscle mass or muscle strength, then you want to pay attention to this bacteria too. So how to increase butyrate-producing bacteria? According to Dr. Natto, food with highly fermentable fiber can become good feed to this bacteria. Foods such as oats, barley, and soybeans and chickpeas. So many of them are great plant-based protein sources. Therefore, those protein sources can become prebiotics too. They become good feed for gut bacteria. However, there are some downsides to plant-based protein sources, usually lower in certain amino acids. So there are 9 essential amino acids which you need to intake from food. And then for the plant protein, usually 1 out of 9 is kind of lower. So if you're eating only certain types of plant protein, you may be lacking one particular amino acid. Especially, amino acids like methionine and leucine, some of them are lower in their amount. And those two amino acids are critical for muscle growth. But if you consume wide variety of plant protein, then they kind of cover enough amino acids. So you don't need to worry too much about it. But generally speaking, animal-based protein sources have all 9 essential amino acids in complete form. The other thing is more calories for the same amount. So if you want to gain enough protein from beans and things, you need to eat a lot. If you have like 200 grams or 300 grams of beans, it's a lot of amount compared to meat. Now, let's talk about animal protein. So what are the animal protein sources? They are red meat, poultry, seafood and fish, eggs, and dairy. For red meat. Now, so today I'm talking about unprocessed red meat and organic red meat, not factory farmed red meat. Because when you talk about factory farmed red meat, they usually contain antibiotics, which are bad for gut microbiome and so on. It's sort of different argument here. So generally speaking, for good quality organic grass-fed, red meat, usually they are higher in methionine and leucine, which are good for the muscle synthesis, and higher in certain nutrients like vitamin B12 and iron. Pork is high in vitamin B1, which is critical for butyrate-producing bacteria. But so is, soybeans and brown rice too. And easier to meet your daily protein amount with smaller servings. And downside to red meat is often considered that may increase risk of heart disease and stroke. Now, the argument is the research is often done on processed red meat. However, there are some studies done for unprocessed red meat as well, and they're still increased. So for the processed one, maybe percentage was 18% increase, while the unprocessed red meat was 9%. It's lower, but still there was an increase. I mean, for details, please go to this website on Healthline. But that was not the case for white meat, not for the fish and chicken, for the heart disease and stroke. So if we want to avoid that risk, alternative is fish and chicken. So let's talk about chicken then, especially chicken breast. Chicken breast has higher protein content than beef and pork. Often chicken breast has the highest protein content and less fat. So for that reason, chicken may be a better option than red meat. How about fish? Yeah, it has a higher protein than most plant protein sources and high in amino acids like leucine, which is critical for muscle mass. But again, when you talk about methionine and leucine, they can activate mTOR too. So often they are considered negative to longevity. So it's a kind of trade-off situation. For you definitely need muscle mass for increasing your health span, but to protecting your disease, you don't want to activate mTOR too much, and you don't want to activate mTOR all the time. So you need some balance here. You need to pay attention to that, those amino acids. And fish contains omega-3 fatty acid, DHA and EPA, which are critical for your gut health, and they are wonderful for your brain. And fish contains calcium and vitamin D, which are good for bone health. So in many ways, fish is a great protein source. And how about eggs? Eggs are considered to be one of the few completely nutritious food, because egg will eventually become a chicken and then chicken. So it contains all nutrients that are essential for your growth, basically. And especially choline in eggs is great for your brain health. How about natto? Natto is one of the highest plant-based protein sources. So if you want to gain protein from plant, definitely you want to include natto. And natto is high in vitamin K2, which is good for the bone, and spermidine, which can activate autophagy, cellular recycling mechanism, and nattokinase, which is great for heart health. Plus, natto contains natto bacteria. For details, please watch my other video, Ignoring Natto, 7 health benefits you need to know. Now, natto bacteria is critical. Its official name is Bacillus subtilis. Now, you have heard of beneficial bacteria, right? So butyrate-producing bacteria is one of the beneficial bacteria. What it does is it produces butyrate. So that's what the name butyrate-producing bacteria comes from. And butyrate is a short-chain fatty acid, which is critical for the gut health. And bifidobacteria and lactic acid bacteria, you probably heard of them. They are abundant in yogurt, kimchi, sauerkraut, and so on. So it's a popular, well-known beneficial bacteria. And so they're called probiotics. Bifidobacteria, lactic acid bacteria, and natto bacteria is also a probiotics. In Japan, whenever you think of probiotics or beneficial bacteria, you think of those three: bifido, lactic acid, and natto. But this is not the case in the West. Bifidobacteria, lactic acid bacteria are common, but not natto bacteria. But that makes a lot of difference. I'll show you why. So there is a bacterial relay taking place in your gut. And in this relay, you need 3 runners: the first runner, the second runner, and the third runner. So you have the second runner, lactic acid bacteria and bifidobacteria, in the Western diet, but you don't have the first runner, natto bacteria. Now, so when you consume fiber and oligosaccharide, they are called prebiotics. You think lactic acid bacteria and bifidobacteria can break them down, but actually they are not good at breaking them down. But natto bacteria is. Natto bacteria is good at breaking fiber and oligosaccharides into sugar, because natto bacteria is one of saccharifying bacteria whose main job is to change this to sugar. And once it becomes sugar, it makes so much easier for lactic acid bacteria and bifidobacteria to break it down. Lactic acid bacteria convert sugar to lactic acid, and in bifidobacteria, sugar to acetic acid. And then the third runner come in, which are propionic acid bacteria and butyrate-producing bacteria. Propionic acid bacteria using the lactic acid to make propionic acid, and butyrate-producing bacteria uses acetic acid to produce butyrate. So for the production of butyrate, you need Natto bacteria, bifidobacteria, and butyrate producing bacteria to complete the relay. Therefore, definitely you want to incorporate natto into your diet. By the way, those three, propionic acid, acetic acid, and butyrate, are called short-chain fatty acid. Therefore, natto and yogurt can be great protein sources for that reason, plus cheese. Cheese contains lactic acid bacteria, and cheese also contains spermidine that I talked about before, which can activate autophagy, cellular recycling mechanism. How about circadian rhythm then? So in the last video, I said I can have a higher protein intake in summertime and lower protein intake in wintertime. So the summer is more mTOR activating period, winter is more autophagy activating period. And the same thing can be true for your protein sources. So you can maybe increase animal protein in summer, and you can increase plant protein in winter. Uh, yeah, that's one way of doing it. Plus, when we talk about circadian rhythm, you can think about Shindo Fuji, which I often talk about. It means body and soil are as one. So in the concept of Shindo Fuji, they recommend to eat locally and seasonally. So if you eat plant, yeah, you end up eating them seasonally because you can harvest different plants at different season. And for fish, for a certain extent too. But also locally is the key. So whatever the protein sources are available in your region, in your landscape. For example, in Japan, we are surrounded by the sea. Fishing is a very big industry in Japan. So it is easier to consume fish than consuming meat in Japan. Our land is not suitable for pastoral farming. So most agricultural land in Japan are rice fields. We have some vegetable field too, but mostly rice field. You hardly ever see pastoral farming in Japan. On the other hand, if you go to a country like Britain, it's a rolling hills, not suitable for rice growing because for rice field, you need to have a flat, completely flat land. So this is more suitable for pastoral farming. That's why pastoral farming is more developed there. So depending on your region, different protein sources may be more easily available. So you can take that into consideration as well. Of course, there are ethical factors. I mean, for most vegans and vegetarians, ethical factors are the reason why you don't want to consume animals. I understand it, and I support it too. As far as factory farming is concerned, I don't think there is any justification. We should avoid eating factory farmed meat as much as possible. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, to practice plant-based diet is an option, definitely an option, and you can gain protein from plant sources only. But if you do, please pay attention to the following two elements. One is diverse ingredient. Try to consume as many different kinds of beans, nuts and seeds, fermented foods such as natto. By diversifying your ingredient, you will cover 9 essential amino acid. Also, increase the amount. So for the plant-based, maybe you're aiming, if you aim for 1.2 or 1.6, it's better than staying on 0.8. Or you can always reduce. For some people, it is very difficult to complete completely stop eating animal product. And for nutritionally speaking too, it becomes more difficult. It's possible, but it becomes difficult. Reducing is much easier option. In this way, you can have a balanced mix. Nutritionally speaking, this is the sweet spot because you can have a little bit of different nutrient and including some of the amino acids that you need. Also, for people who eat meat too, including plant is critical because you don't want to gain your protein only from animal sources. You don't want to have too much leucine and methionine for the reason I talked about before. When you invest, wise way to invest is to invest on different stocks, some of the kind of opposing stocks. So when this stock goes up, the other one goes down. So you mitigate the damage. So this may be a wise way to balance your diet so you will not lose one thing completely. You can always sort of balance it out when something happens. To do that, you can make your priority. So in my case, plant comes the first priority. So try to source your protein from plant bases first. Beans, nuts and seeds, natto. Definitely natto is an important part of the plant protein sources. And then next comes fish, yogurt, eggs. Fish for the omega-3 fatty acid, yogurt for the bifidobacteria, eggs for the choline, and then chicken for the higher protein intake. If you have plant, fish, yogurt, eggs, and chicken, probably you don't need red meat. You can cover enough nutrient from those protein sources. But if you like, you can, include red meat as the last resort. But to do that anyway, you want to choose organic, which means grass-fed, free range, not factory farmed meat for the eggs, chicken as well, and dairy. And then definitely not processed food. So you can avoid sausages and bacons and stuff like that completely. So this is just one way of doing it, but it's all up to you. The other way is practicing Hare and Ke diet. Hare is a time of celebration. Ke is a usual or disciplined period. So in my case, I set week to be Ke and weekend to be Hare. So during the week, it's a disciplined period. I try to stay in a plant-centered diet. I do have fish and yogurt though, but usually, try to eat as much plant as possible. But on the weekend, I can include some other animal products. So that is another way of doing it. Now, advantage of doing this is you can afford more expensive meat, such as grass-fed and free range. If you consume meat every day, on the other hand, it can be quite expensive too. For your economy, it is a wiser option. For details, please read my book, especially chapter 3, chapter 4, and some other chapters. I talk about precisely what I eat for different sort of gains and plus my exercise routine and things too. The book is available on Amazon, the following Amazon site for the print-on-demand paperback, and it is available on Kindle ebook as well. Well, thank you for watching. Again, my name is Hachiaki Takamiya, the author of Live Wiser, Not Smarter. If you like this video, please give me your thumb up and subscribe to my channel. And please leave your comment. How do you source your protein? Thank you. Well, I will see you in the next video. Live with your Ikigai!